going into the name and parts, let's go there. So, where we are right now, this is like phase 2 on the rigor trajectory. I see you have it up. I'm looking at it also. This is on the rigor side, which is on the right side.
Yeah.
Scroll past phase 1 and into phase 2. Let's look at 3, 4, and 5. Take a minute, just look through this. Let's see like where your gut leads you, so which actions that we should choose. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so just gonna pre-plug this. It's cascading effects, waterfall. So if you have 3, we go on to 4, we go to 5. So keeping that in mind, where do you think we should land?
I think definitely the exemplar. This is where I knew that I knew it in the lesson, in the moment. I had, the day before we had to print out the answers to PFAs.
Right.
And that was my example of the exemplar for that task, for the first objective. The checkpoints, I had an exemplar that I carried around, did not have it on my person. So that was a little bit more difficult as far as like being able to show the kids. I could have, looking back, I could have put the exemplar up for them to look at as an example for feedback. It's like some poem that they hadn't seen before and me breaking it down with the different devices and then explaining structure. Because the biggest thing that took my time was when I was giving feedback for the checkpoint, they kept saying, well, what do you mean explain how the structure as meeting? They were able to identify the poetic device, they were able to explain the effect of the poetic device, but they weren't able to connect those two through the structure of the poem, like, you know, such as like punctuation or the capitalization or how the stanzas were oriented, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that could have been useful as far as like showing, okay, these stanzas have this effect and putting that in front of them. So, and then that ties into the aggressive monitoring. I know it's a cascading independent practice because that'll set up, you know, they're able to practice that based off of, they don't need to raise their hand in that time. And then aggressive monitoring, like if I'm coming around with an exemplar, I go, you see how I.
All right, so like let's pause right there because you just nailed it again. One has to come before the other.
Right.
So you have to commit to having the exemplar that you created in hand. I know how it is. Definitely, exemplar ends up sitting on my desk. I'm like, I did that last night. I remember it. Just reviewed it. You're walking around giving feedback. There's another part that's going to help you with this exemplar. And you said it. You said I kept having to give the same piece of feedback. If you chunk your students into basically 3 groups, I'm going to have to give this piece of feedback, this piece of feedback, and this piece of feedback based on what I know about my students and the work I've seen already this year. You can quickly just give that feedback. And like you said, you could even differentiate by keeping it up on the board, projecting it, saying, if I gave you a star, read the first paragraph here. If I gave you a plus sign, you're doing the second one. If I gave you a circle, look at the third one. And that's gonna help you with the structure aspect of this checkpoint. So you differentiate your lesson that way, but it's differentiated on your exemplar. It helps you chunk feedback and give quicker feedback.
That is a really good idea. I'm not even just saying that either because they really crave the aggressive monitoring. They go, hey, you didn't give me a check. If I don't check their do nows. Like, oh, like I did write my name. Check that. So I have 4 checks, but they want the last check. I never knew in this world that these checks matter, but I think this would tie in well with that aggressive monitoring that's tied into the feedback. Because I would like, that's one of the biggest struggles for me right now is like a new teacher. I'm like, how do I give this fast?
Yeah. Like 30 minutes per student check-in, 25, like running out of time, right?
Running out.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna create aggressive monitor pathways, but for now, the first key is having the exemplar in hand and dedicating time to that.
And I think also, well, not to cut you off, but for the exemplar, like the kids I've seen so far are very color oriented. They really wanna see the difference, the shade and difference that stands out to them. So like if I had that color coded, they responded really well to color coded so far. Like if I have different markers, they respond different to different markers. I tried purple one day. It was the worst day of class I ever had.
What?
I have no idea.
Just purple was
tough. I do blue, they're fine.
Yeah.
Any shade of blue.
Maybe something about that color purple.
I never do red, because I know red has some kind of feeling. I never do green, because it has another feeling.
Really?
Yeah. I only do blue.
What about like light green?
No, I can't do this green. If I do this green, they feel like they've accomplished everything. If I put a circle, they still don't think it's a circle. If I put purple, I'm telling you, I've had terrible days with purple.
I'd like to see some numbers behind that.
We're gonna do a study.
All right, so we have to see it. We named it. Let's do it. Do you have any like lesson materials ready for Monday?
I have pieces of one, yes.
Good. Let's look at a piece of student work and your exemplar responses.
Okay.
And if you want, we could take 2, 3, 5 minutes right now to script them out.
Okay. Let's stick with the 10th grade, because that'll be quicker. So for my next lesson, you mean?
Yep.
Okay. Indeed. Okay. So their next task, we're going straight into checkpoint 2, which means that they will do an annotation based off of word choice into a poem. So,
And they're just annotating here?
they're gonna annotate and they're gonna post these annotations.
What are they looking for in their annotation? Oh, you're getting it.
So what they're tasked to do is they're tasked to explain how word choice adds meaning to the author in 3 or 4 different ways. So the first one, they have to identify and explain the multiple meanings of the most powerful words and phrases. So what I do is I break apart the most powerful words, and we did this in a previous activity where I have them circle important words, and then I want them to narrow that down into 1 to 3 of the most powerful words. So I would circle all the really important words, and so then after that, they explain, after they identify and explain the multiple meanings of these different words, they have to explain how these words or phrases have an impact on the meaning and tone of the poem. So then they'd have to connect that with a little line and explain how it has an effect on the meaning and tone. And after that, the final 2 things they have to do is consider how these words relate to the context or medium of the poem. So that's going to be probably a new vocabulary word for a lot of them, is medium or context. And then they have to finally explain why this poem was put up in a community, because we have all the poems that we've selected have been put up in a community in some way, they've been displayed. And their final product, what they'll eventually do is explain a certain poem and why it needs to be put up in our community as a community proposal in a letter.
Great.
Yeah.
So sticking with this annotation, how much time will they have for this?
About 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
They'll have 30 minutes, but it'll be segmented. So I'll give like 10 minutes of this amount of time, and then 10 minutes setting up this next one, and then the third, because it's 4 different tasks, and I really want them to get like feedback and instruction on those 4 different tasks. So I stopped them wherever they're at in this first one,